My mother had her life planned from the time she was 2. She wanted dogs, she wanted a car, she wanted horses. She wanted to be a horse. I asked her once what she ate for breakfast every day in Denver, Colorado when she was Barbara Lee Owen, 2 and 3 years old and living at the Denver city limits where the Prairie came from Kansas and stopped at her back door. And she said, shredded wheat. She was eating shredded wheat when she told me, sitting on the couch with her last dog. She said it was like hay. I wanted to eat what horses eat. And shredded wheat was as close as I could get to hay. If I couldn't be a horse or have a horse, I wanted everything to be like a horse. My mother was a horse. Every year at Christmas, she said, my parents asked me what I wanted, and I said, a horse. She didn't have one until she married my father, Jack Weir, and moved to New Jersey, but she had dogs and cars from the time she was born. I have always had a car, she said when she was 85 years old, and everyone she knew, me and my brother Rob and sister Patty and her doctor and lawyer and the guy at the Department of Motor Vehicles, told her it was no longer safe for her to drive, and she said, I have driven a car my whole life. Since you were 2, I said. I have always driven a car. She told me a lot of stories at the end of her life, and I figured some of them couldn't be true or entirely true, but it turns out they were all true. I know this because it's on film. Shortly after my mother died, Rob found hours of 8mm film footage from the early 1930s in a Keebler saltines tin. Her parents, Bob and Evalyn Owen, were pioneers, not of the American West, but of suburban Denver and the home movie camera. They had a 1932 Kodak 8, Kodak's first 8mm home movie camera, and my mother was their movie star. She was an only child, and she was the center of attention from the start. She always had a gang, kids to play with, barking dogs, and her parents took her on vacation from coast to coast across Depression-era America. She wasn't hit by the Depression because her dad worked in radio. He was chief engineer of Denver's radio station KOA, one of the first stations that opened during the radio craze after World War I. When he wasn't filming the construction of KOA's new transmitter building and its 50,000-watt tower, he was taking his family from one engineering site to the other across the U.S. Roosevelt was president, and the country was newly under construction. They went to the Boulder Dam, not yet renamed the Hoover Dam, where they got a VIP tour of the massive construction site from a fellow engineer. They went to the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, its motto, Science finds, industry applies, man adapts. She got a panoramic view of the city of Chicago from the fair's iconic skyride. There were no horses to ride, but she found some animatronic dinosaurs. And she saw giant statues from The Wizard of Oz 6 years before they were screen characters. She also got her first lesson in what would later become her passion, driving a horse and carriage. And every summer before the war, they took a road trip from Denver to New York City. Her parents sat in front, driving and smoking cigarettes, her mother in a flapper hat, and she sat in the back in movie star sunglasses and planned a detour through Kentucky to visit Man o' War, the world's most famous horse. In New York, her father shot footage of the newly finished RCA building, where 20 years later she would meet my father when they both worked for NBC. We stayed in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, she said, where I had my first drink. You drank in a hotel when you were 2? I was 12. it was a Shirley Temple. I had Shirley Temple hair, but I did not drink Shirley Temples. I never drank Shirley Temples. I hated Shirley Temple. My mother did my hair like that. So, what did your father give you to drink in the hotel? A whiskey sour. When you were 2? I was very fond of my father. And there was a trip to Yellowstone National Park to meet a bear. My father made me hug a bear. You hugged a bear? I was 3. Your father made you hug a bear and feed him lunch, and no one reported him to Child Services? Where was your mother? She was filming it. She loved the mountains. I never understood what she liked about New Jersey. In Colorado, in the 1930s, they could put on their snowsuits and drive up into the Rockies like it was their backyard. They had snow then, and a mobile unit from the radio station, and they could ski from the back of their cars and broadcast it over the airwaves. In the summertime, she camped out in the Rockies with her parents and her dog, and she learned to swim. My father taught me to swim by throwing me in Grand Lake. Your father threw you in a lake? Sure. When you were 3? Why not? She was a prairie flower. The governor called me his little prairie flower, she said. So you did grow up in Kansas. I did not grow up in Kansas. Next to Kansas. I have never been to Kansas. How did you get to New York in a car if you didn't drive through Kansas? I don't remember anything about Kansas. But you were a prairie flower. The governor of Colorado told me that, Dan Thornton. You said you were his little prairie flower? In the lobby of the Brown Palace Hotel. When you were 12? I was 20 by then. That's another story. I've had a great life. I did everything I wanted. I had horses. I had dogs. I would still be driving my car if not for you. I lived in some great cities. I had fun. Pretty much the last thing I ever heard her say was in the hospital. She was in bed. She wanted to go home. I was trying to get the hospital to let her go home. It took a while, but I got her there. She wanted to be at home with her dog, and that's what she told me a couple days before she died. She pointed to the bed, with her left hand pointed to the empty side of her bed, and she said, D-O-G, dog. I got her home to her dog. The last thing I said to her, shortly before she went home, which I think she heard, was that I would never get over her. I told her everything she had done in her life, all her accomplishments. She was the most certain person I have ever met. She knew what she thought and felt and wanted, always, and she mostly always got it. And I thanked her for her certainty, which I wish I shared. And I said, I'll never get over you, which is true.